Carbon dioxide or CO2 emissions are greenhouse gases resulting from the burning of fossil fuels. A greenhouse gas or GHG is a gas that absorbs and emits thermal radiation, creating a greenhouse effect, while carbon dioxide is important in keeping the Earth a habitable temperature. The excessive CO2 emissions caused by the increasing consumption of fossil fuels are disrupting Earth's carbon cycle and accelerating global warming. In this segment, I would like to present to you some facts on the world's carbon emission. The first one will be about the trend on carbon dioxide emissions from fossil fuel year by year. In 2014, the carbon dioxide emissions from fossil fuel reaching 35.6. And then this is the index actually. This one is taken from the Global Carbon Project. In 2015, 35.5, 2016, 35.7, and 2017, 36.2, and 2018, 37.1. The Guardian on October this year reformulated some findings on the 20 fossil fuel companies whose relentless exploitation of the world's oil, gas and coal reserves can be directly linked to more than one-third of all greenhouse gas emissions in the modern era. The top 20 companies on the list have contributed to 35% of all energy-related carbon dioxide and methane worldwide, totaling 480 billion tons of carbon dioxide equivalent since 1965. We cut the list into 6 companies with the biggest carbon dioxide contribution. Who are those? Let's see the next slide. This is 6 companies with the biggest carbon contribution to the world from 1965 to 2017 in billion tons. The first one is BP, 34.02 billion tons. National Iranian Oil Co., 35.66 billion tons. ExxonMobil, 41.9 billion tons. Gazprom, 43.23 billion tons, Chevron, 43.35 billion tons, and Saudi Aramco, with the contribution of the carbon to the world reaching 59.26 billion tons. The Guardian approached the 20 companies named in the polluters list. 8 of them have replied. Some argued that they were not directly responsible for how the oil, gas or coal they extracted were used by consumers. Several disputed claims that the environmental impact of fossil fuels was known as far back as the late 1950s, or that the industry collectively had worked to delay action. Most explicitly said that they accepted the climate science, and some claim to support the target set out in the Paris Agreement to reduce emissions and keep global temperature rises to 1.5 Celsius above pre-industrial levels. So how about Indonesia's contribution to carbon emission? Let's see the next slide. In 2017, Indonesia's contribution to the carbon emission in the world reaching 516 million tons. In 2018, the number was increased to 543 million tons. This one is taken from BP Energy Outlook 2019. Between 2010 to 2017, total global CO2 emissions have increased from 33.1 gigatons to 36.2 gigatons and are projected to increase in the coming years. Unfortunately, CO2 emissions are increasing around the world, and the nations that are emitting the highest amounts are not doing enough to reduce emissions. There are as much as 5 cities in the world with the biggest carbon emission. Who are they? Let's see the next graphic. The first one, actually this is the 5th one is Los Angeles, USA, Hong Kong, China, New York, USA, Guangzhou, China, and the first one, or the city that contributed the biggest carbon emission to the world, is Seoul, South Korea. This one is taken from DW.com. In general, developed countries have higher CO2 emissions. In the United States, energy use has increased in the past 5 years, most likely due to greater heating and cooling demands, and cheaper oil prices increase the number of people traveling. This increase comes after almost a decade of a decrease in energy use. The world is looking at these developed countries to lead the initiatives for lowering CO2 emissions. China has the highest level of CO2 emission, reducing or producing 904.07 million tons of carbon dioxide in 2015. The United States has the second highest of 499.75 million tons and has the second highest CO2 emission per capita of 15.53. Saudi Arabia has the highest CO2 emission per capita of 16.85. Polluted air had caused the emergence of death case in many regions in the world. To see how severe the condition is, let's see the data. This is numbers of deaths caused by polluted air. Okay, this one is, we're going to see another graphic, to be exact. The next graphic will be about, pollution is a global issue, and most countries in Southeast Asia are now experiencing high levels of air pollution, particularly in urban areas, whereas the annual mean levels have considerably exceeded the World Health Organization or WHO limit. In Vietnam, the air quality levels are already at an unhealthy level for sensitive groups of people such as children and elderly adults. There is a hope in terms of a country that being considered as example that have to be followed by many countries in the world to implement some efforts to drastically minimize the carbon emission. Bhutan, a country in the south part in Asia continent, became a country with carbon negative. What they do to reach such achievement? Let's see the next data. This is Bhutan's strategies to push down carbon emission. The first one is implementing sustainable environment management, implementing low carbon transportation system, developing renewable energy generation, implementing efficiency in energy demand, and implementing integrated low carbon emission in villages and cities. For the past 46 years, the Bhutanese government has opted to measure progress not through its gross domestic product, but through gross national happiness, which places great emphasis on the protection of the country's rich natural environment. Bhutan is the only country in the world that by its own constitution project its forest. Environmental protection is enshrined in the constitution, which states that a minimum of 60% of Bhutan's total land should be maintained under forest cover for all time. The country even banned logging exports in 1999. May all the countries that committed to the global environmental agreement or not, giving all of it contribution to make the world to be a better place. And stay tuned on Market Lens because we'll be right back after the break.